The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by HDA ModelWorks, suppliers of scale lighting products, detail accessory parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today.
Well, hi there again, everybody. Boyd here with you. Well, this is update number 2 of our Cylon BaseStar build. This is the old Revell 30th anniversary kit. And when I talked about this in the introductory video, I talked about doing lighting on it and everything. You can see I've started working on it here a little bit, doing some of the paneling details. I painted this whole, all these parts here. There's 4 of these discs. They look like kind of old wheel covers. But they're pretty cool. There's really a lot of detail like I talked about, and it popped out quite a bit more when I did my paint work. Now I'm doing these little different colors here around. You can see a little bit of that detail on the box art. It turns out that these panels, each one of them is a little bit different. I thought they were going to be symmetrical, but they're all a little bit different, so I'm working my way around. I did like a drizzle gray Delta Ceramcoat Hobbycraft paint in the acrylic of the base color of the hull. I sprayed the entire thing with a black light blocking paint, just a flat black spray can on the top, on the inside and the outside, because I wanted to have that act like a little bit of a pre-shading here on the hull detail. What I'm going to do after I get all this done, that's all adding these extra colors here, I'm going to do a black wash over the top of it, and that's going to really make all this little greeley detail and everything pop out. Like I said, this has 4 parts. So there's some interesting things. The fiber optics that I'm installing in here, you can see I'm using 0.50 fiber optic, and I'm working my way around. I drilled out little holes here on these kind of trenches to give little window details or little porthole details right along in here, which will look really cool. And then in the center part here, this kind of sits on top. This is the upper part of the model that you can see here. Now we have these little trenches that are down in here in the center. This will be basically on top of it like that, with the other part on top. So that's where the little garage doors are, if you want to call them that, where the Cylon Raiders are supposed to come in and out. And so you get these little detail parts here with the kit. Now these come, completely solid. I had to take a little, file, and I had to drill these out and file all these open. Same thing, I had to make openings here. I'm going to take these apart here so I can get you a better shot of that. The center part of the trench here was also solid, so I had to go in there and just take my Dremel tool and open those up. I didn't have to be really pretty in there because this piece goes over top of that, just like that, and kind of covers that up. So we're going to have a little bit of lighting coming out of there. I'm going to have a little bit of blue, just a faint kind of blue glow coming out of there, like that's kind of the core of the ship, or whatever. It'll look really cool with the, the mixed in lighting on the little window ports along these trenches and everything. Up here on the top, there's another little detail. I'll show you. Let me grab that real quick. This is a pretty neat looking detail. It's got a lot of greeleys and stuff on there, but it's kind of open a little bit in the middle. So I thought what might be kind of neat for that is you can see how it sits up on here on the top. I'm going to put a pulsing SMD in here, probably a red one, and it'll give a nice kind of glow. I don't want to overdo it where it looks like a big old beacon on the top. I'm just going to make it real dim so you can just barely notice it, and maybe that's the ship's power core or something, or their part of their defensive system or something. You can take a little bit of liberty with this because they don't show a lot of detail about this on the original Battlestar Galactica show. It doesn't look like there's much lighting on it. They never get really super close to it, and it's just a basic looking model. But I think we can have a little bit of fun with that and just give it some, extra pop, kind of thinking logically what they might have done or whatever if they wanted to and had a bigger budget. But that's going to be a lot of fun. So you can see I got a lot more work to do here. I've got to do all my fiber optic for these trenches. Now, being that this is the top, you can see that it has these little details that went all the way around the circumference, and I started thinking about, okay, what are those? And I think what they were supposed to be is they were supposed to be laser turrets, like I think maybe in the show they do actually show them firing. There's not a lot of episodes where they actually show a base star, but I came to the conclusion that these are some kind of, defensive mechanism, like a laser turret or whatever. So anyway, long story short, we're going to actually, give these a firing effect. So what I've done here is you can see I've connected, I'm using a couple of 5mm red LEDs, and those are, going to the fiber optics, and those are up here going to these little ports. I had to carefully take a little pin vise that is just a tiny little nub that sticks up on there, and it's not exactly flat. So I had to take a pin vise with a really tiny bit and just, drill a pilot hole in each one by hand. You couldn't do it with a Dremel because you'd be wobbling all over the place, but I was able to get those done. They look pretty good. Those are actually on the bottom detail too, but I'm not going to worry about the bottom. You're not going to really be able to see that much anyway, so just mainly these top ones, I'm going to light these up. Now, I originally thought about doing that with a, I am going to put a soundboard in this with some sound effects, and I could do that. I could make these actually, work with the sound effect of the laser firing, but they would all fire exactly the same, and I thought I wanted to give it a little bit of, break that up a little bit. So I started thinking about my good friend Ralph at Tenna Controls again, and he has a little board there that's actually for the Terminator Hunter tank killer, and I actually built that kit quite a while ago, and I talked to Ralph about designing a board to make the little laser turrets on the tank killer fire. It had one on each shoulder, 2 guns on each side, and they fire a little bit at random. So I thought of that board right away. I was like, hey, that'll be great, because that'll, I can, with these 2 different LEDs here on each bank, I can mix it up. I can mix up the outputs on this, so it'll, a couple of them will be firing at the same time, which is fine, but the ones right next to it will look like they're firing at a different rate, so that'll give it a little bit more of a, like the gunners were a little bit more independent or whatever, and I think that'll look quite a bit better. So that's the plan for that. Now, talking again about the fiber optics here, I've been using this product again that I've been talking to you guys a lot about, this Solar Res, because turns out this stuff works really great for working with fiber optics, because as we all know, fiber optics has a problem with gluing it. You can't use CA glue, you can't use model glue, because it'll attack the fibers. It'll basically destroy it. So you have to use some type of a glue, like a canopy glue or a slow drying glue, epoxy or something like that, and it would take forever for these things to set up once you glued them. And so I thought, let me test this out with some of the Solar Res, because we can dry that stuff instantly with the UV light. So I started, I put a little bit on a piece of fiber optic, tried it, tested it with some lights, and it was just fine. So I went ahead and installed all the fiber optics with Solar Res. I just put, a little, make a little puddle on a piece of paper, take a toothpick, dip it in there, and when I push the fiber optic in from the back side here, I just basically go around it a little bit, and then hit it with my UV light, my little UV flashlight. It cures instantly, and then I just go back on the outside with my clipper and clip off the excess fiber until it's flush, and that's been working out really, really good. No problem at all. It seems to stick really good to the fiber, sticks good to the the inner part, even though there's paint on it, and works out really, really good. So you can go through your fiber optic work really, really fast now, instead of waiting hours for the stuff to dry. That was one reason why I didn't use a lot of fiber optics. I didn't like to wait for the long drying time. Now you can see what I did here. I want to point something out about fiber optic lighting, because I get asked this question quite a bit. The method that I used here is what we call using an emitter. So I've got, you can see here, this one hasn't been taped over yet. I tape over those because I want to block the light, coming out. That's the whole reason for using an emitter with fiber optics, so you don't have a bunch of light leaks. You can basically get that all put together, either put shrink wrap or paint over it actually, or wrap it with electrical tape like I did. And that'll block off all the light from the LED. That way the only light going through is in the fibers, and that's very, very dim. So you won't have to worry about a bunch of light leaks, coming out of your model if you're gonna be dealing with a model that might have a lot of gaps and stuff in it. You can work around that way. But another method that I've used quite often is that you can just take and put down some LED strips or whatever in here, pretty close to where your lighting source is going to be, and then just cut little small pieces of fiber, just enough to where they'll be flush on the outside and they'll protrude to the inside, maybe about 1/4 of an inch or something like that. And then your light strip will light those up, the same as if you had an emitter in here. You know, you don't have to have the fiber directly touching on that. A lot of people have not tried that method or not used it. A couple times I can think of where I used it was when I built a couple of my big ship models where I lit the entire hull, you know, all the ports, the window ports, like on the Lusitania I did, the Bismarck, a couple other things, and some other models I've done that same way. And it works really good because you can, you know, you don't have to do all this work. This is a crazy amount of work putting all these individual fibers in here. It's really time consuming. And I also have to make the emitter. Now I'm going to show you here in a little bit how I'm actually doing this. What I'm doing is I'm taking these little LEDs and I'm drilling into there with a small pilot hole in the very tip, making, you know, being really careful not to go down too far and hit the diode. That's one thing you want to be careful if you do that. But you drill a little pilot hole right in the center of the tip. Then I use my Dremel tool with a bigger bit, and then I come in and I drill a little bit more. Then I have a little kind of pocket now that I can take these fiber optic strands. You know, I think I'm putting like 10 on each bulb here, and then slide those, you know, get them all in a little tight little bundle, push them into that hole, and then just go around that with the solar res and cure it, and then you've got a nice little emitter, you know, set up and everything. And that's been working really good. I did the same thing for these red ones here on the for the laser banks. So that's the method I've been using. Now you can actually buy little plastic emitter cups, they call them. So you can, you know, it's made to have like a 3mm or 5mm LED push in there, and then it's got an opening on the other side for the fibers to go in. But this method is, you know, you obviously don't have to buy those, and it works just as well. But, you know, the other method that I talked about with the strips and everything, it's great because it's a lot, you know, it saves you a ton of time and you'll get the same effect on your lighting. Problem is you may have some light leaks because you're putting a lot of light, you know, inside of the model. And so with the way this fits, it seemed to fit pretty good. I test fitted it and everything, you know, the halves fit together pretty good, but I thought, man, if it leaks light, I'm going to have a lot of areas I'm going to have to go in here and fix and everything. So I decided to do it this way, and it's working out just fine. It's going to take a little bit more time. So after we get past this part here, I'm going to sit down and show you how I make one of these emitters, and I'll show you how the solar res works with our fiber optics and everything. Now, the other part that I did here, this is a question that pops up a lot on my channel here, is how I'm mounting these models on, you know, on a mounting rod. Now, you can see I'm going to be using this Polar Lights base. This is an extra one that I had left over from a Enterprise I did, and we put it on a different stand or something like that. And this is going to be perfect because the model is going to sit on here really nice. I'll be able to swivel it. It's just the right height that I want it to be and everything. It's going to be a nice stable platform, and it's going to have enough room. I'll have 5 individual switches on here, little momentary switches for my sound effects, and 1 button here for the power to turn the model off and on. And I'll put a power jack back here in the, you know, rear for the little power jack supply to come in, and all of our wiring can come up through that, and so that's going to work out great. But in order to do that, since this model didn't have any kind of a, you know, it had a setup for it, but it had a setup for the little plastic swivel base, which wouldn't have worked. So what I did here is, this is a standard method that I use on any kind of model I'm going to do, like whether it's a, you know, starship or whatever, an airplane that doesn't have a base, you know, that came with it. I'll take a little block of wood. This is just an old piece of scrap wood that I had, and I cut it down. It doesn't have to be pretty at all. Now, sometimes you may have to, if you've got a starship or something, it may have a curved floor. You know, you may have to shape that a little bit so it sits down there nice and flat. And then use some really good epoxy. I used a 48-hour epoxy on this. It's super strong, and glued it in place. But the trick to this is when you drill this hole for your mounting rod, what you want to do is you want to start off, you know, of course, get your center, and then start off where you want, you know, the hole to be with an undersized bit that's maybe like 2 sizes smaller than what the actual diameter, the outside diameter of this rod is. Then come back with the actual size of the rod, and then drill up into that, but make sure you don't go all the way through. Just stop, you know, a little bit from the top or whatever. Now, I have a little drill press here in the shop that I use for this, so I can control that and everything. If you're doing it by hand, you just need to be a little bit more careful. But What that does then is it allows this rod to go into the bottom of the model, slide up in there, and it won't go all the way through then, you see, because you've stopped at the very top and the hole is smaller at the very top. And what that means is that it'll still sit down there nice and solid, and you can swivel it and all that, and it's just basically sitting on there with gravity. And but you still have a hole here where your wiring from your rod, from everything down below, can come up through there, like your power and everything. If you have a momentary switch that's controlling something, or however you're setting your stuff up. But that'll allow you to get all your wiring in here, and that's basically it. It's a really simple principle. You don't need anything sophisticated. Back in the day when I started first putting these things together, I was using the threaded rod, with a lock nut, jam nut on there, and I would have that on the inside of the model. And then but I quit using those because one thing, they're kind of really big in diameter, and I just don't like the way they look with the threads on there. You can buy little plastic covers and stuff. In some cases, you may still want to use something like that if it's a really big model that's going to have a lot of weight on it, because those are really big and thick. But for most practical purposes, these little, you can buy these Polar Lights bases separately, by the way. You can buy this large size one, and you can buy the smaller one, and they all come with a hollow tube, so you can do wiring and stuff. So these are just really, really practical, and they're not very expensive either. I'll paint this up really nice, fix it up. Right now it's just looking kind of rough. But so that's the basic idea of mounting, the model on a base. Now that rod could be put down onto a different type of a custom base or whatever, as long as it's just the principle of using that rod to go in here. And that's how I do it. So, okay guys, I think that's it for this first part here. I'm going to get things rearranged here. I'm going to set this up so I can turn on the lights for this and show you how they look. And then we're going to go in and we're going to start putting in a little bit more fiber optic. I'm going to build one of the emitters for you guys, and I'm going to show you some more on how this solar res stuff works for that. So I'll be right back with that, everybody. All right, you guys, I'm back with you once more here. I got myself set up pretty good, ready to do some more work on our BaseStar. What I want to do first is I want to turn on the power, show you guys the fiber optic lighting in these trenches right now and how it's looking. You can see I'm working my way around. It's going to look really cool. They're going to be a little bit in the shadows, once the model is put together. And taking a look at them, off the bat, I can tell you that they're going to be a little bit too bright. I'm running it at 9 volts right now. And, I always like to think about the scale of things when I do my lighting. And this thing is supposed to be huge. It's supposed to be even bigger than the Battlestar Galactica. So I think they're a little bit too bright. So it's an easy fix. What I'll do is once I get everything tied together, all the rest of the LEDs put in, I'll go in my little box of resistors that I have, and I'll pick a resistor that'll dim all this down and still allow everything else to operate at 9 volts. I'm going to run the antenna control board at 9 and the sound board at 9. So that's an easy fix. And when I get to that part, probably in the next video, I'll show you how I do that. So there's how the lighting looks. I think it looks really cool. We're going to finish doing that on the whole. I still got a long way to go on those. So, but it's coming out really nice. I think putting in the effort on it's going to make the model have that little extra, kick to it, like I was hoping for. So let's move this stuff out of the way. And right now I'm going to show you guys how I put together one of these emitters. This is a standard 5mm white LED with a 470 ohm quarter-watt resistor on there, so it'll run from 9 to 12 volts with no problem. Got my fibers here. Cut these off at a length of about maybe 4 inches a piece, 5 inches, something like that, just to get me in the ballpark. Now I'm going to work all these together and get these into a nice little group when I go to put it in the LED here. But I've got to prep the LED first, so I'm going to start off here with my pin vise. I've got this really small little drill bit on here because I can get right on the very tip of this this LED. Just kind of looking at it by eye here, and then I'm going to slowly turn it because it's going to want to move on you. It's going to want to jump off of that, that tip of this LED. So I'm just going to gradually put a little bit of pressure on it and start twisting it real slow. And I'm starting to see the plastic shavings come off of the bit already, so I'm making my way in. The whole trick to this is to, just take your time. Don't push too hard or whatever. It'll skip off of there. And we're just, we're using this smaller one first because I want a pilot hole for my my bigger size bit. And now the other thing I want to mention is that when I'm going down in here, I'm looking at it from the side, and I don't need to make the pilot hole super deep, but when I do drill into this, I don't want to go too far and hit the you know, the diode that's in there, because if you do that, the LED's junk. So the pilot hole's deep enough. Now we're going to come back with our Dremel tool here on the low setting. I'm going to locate my little pinhole, or my little, you know, pilot hole, and I'm going to start going in. Now I'm looking at this from the side, and I want to make sure that I don't go down too far. That's about as far as I need to go. Okay, so the whole point to this is, let me get rid of this. The whole point to this is that we're just making a little cup. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty, for our fiber optics to sit into, so it'll have a little place to anchor itself, all right? So now I've got that hole in there. I'm going to work on this little group of fiber optics I've got, and I'm just going to keep, you know, squeezing it together. Now you want to make sure all the strands are equal, you know, in length. They're all flush. Not one of them's not pushed back too far or whatever. So I'm just kind of checking that out, getting that all worked together here, and I'm going to squeeze it more and more and work my fingers closer to the tip, so where hopefully I can get, you know, a nice little small group there. And then we're going to push it into the cup here. Get them all in there. All right. Looks like they're all pretty much in there. I've got 10 strands on this particular one. I could probably squeeze maybe 2 or 3 more in there if I wanted to, but I've got, you know, one thing I missed that I should have been more paid attention to better was when I was drilling the holes for the fiber optics for the windows. I just kind of started doing it at random. I should have made the equal amount on each one. That's something that you want to pay a little bit better attention to. It doesn't really matter. It'll just look like some of them aren't lit or whatever, you know, which would, I guess, kind of be more realistic anyway. But if you're going to do this specifically, you probably want to keep count on the holes. But okay, so we've got our solar res here. I'm going to make a little puddle. This stuff is really, really thick like molasses, so it'll take a second for it to come out the tip. I'm going to squeeze a little bit of it out here, and then take our toothpick. I'm going to hold these kind of something like that, get it nice and straight. Dip our toothpick in this stuff, and I'm just going to wipe it all the way around the circumference of this these fiber optics, and just work a nice little bead of this stuff in there. I'm going up onto the fibers a little bit, and one thing I learned about doing it this way too, I'm gonna force it in between a couple of these fibers, and I wound up pushing them out of there, which wasn't good, but I can work these all back in. Get a little bit on my fingers, but that's all right. Again, the beauty of this stuff is that it doesn't dry unless you hit it with UV light, so we're not hurting anything here. This stuff is pretty much non-toxic and all that. I'm going to work these back into the cup. Okay, got them pretty well in there. See one on the outside that didn't go in all the way. Okay, so I got them pushed back in there. Kind of funny, the ones I did before off camera all went nice and smooth, and this one kind of messed up on me, but I got them back in there. So I'm going to hit it with the UV. This only takes a few seconds and it'll start setting up. You can see they're already on there. Pretty good. Got a little bit on my finger there. The stuff, if you get it on your fingers and it dries, it just falls right off. It doesn't stick to skin very good at all. I found that out. So I'm just working my way around here, making sure I get it on all sides. All right. And then I'm going to make a little bit more here and just go over it once more to make sure I got all the fibers covered nice and good and they're all locked down. Okay. About 10 to 15 seconds is all you need. A little longer if you make it really thick. You know, I've made some I've been doing a lot of experimenting with this stuff and making little window ports and things. If you make it thicker, it takes a little longer, and you got to hit it from both sides if you make it too thick. I talked about that a couple months ago, showing how I use some of this stuff on the big enterprise I'm working on, making the window ports on it. I used Scotch tape because it's transparent. I think some others out there have picked up on that little trick. It works really good. You can cure it from both sides. If you use like a painter's tape or whatever on the one side, it's gonna, the light won't hit it. So transparent Scotch tape, it goes right through it. Okay, so we've got this all, give it a nice little pull to make sure it's all solid for you and everything, and we're good to go here. So we've made an emitter. So what I'll do after that, the basics, I won't go through all that because it's pretty easy to explain. I'm just going to wrap it with some black electrical tape, go up the fibers a little bit, come down around the bottom of the bulb, and that way it'll seal off most of the light coming out of that, so I won't have big light leaks. Solder my resistor on, solder a negative and a positive wire on, and it's ready to go. Now we're going to take this and show you a little bit, one more little step here before we call this video a wrap. And I'm going to take one of the fibers and put it into the model and show you how that's been working. So I've got this little one I'm working on here next. I'm starting off at the very, the end, and I'm going to have the, I want my LED to kind of lay in here like this, and then on the other side kind of like that, so I'll have it reversed so there's enough room for everything. So I just pick one of these threads, or these fibers, and I start off at the very end where I've got a hole there, and I'll just push it in. I got these drilled to the exact size, so they push in pretty tight. They probably would sit in there without even any, without even gluing them, but I don't want to take that chance. I'm going to go back and glue them all. Okay, so that one there I think is not drilled all the way through. I'll have to go back and fix that one. Okay, let's pick a second one here. Figures I would pick that one first. Okay, we got that one go through. So I push in the fiber until my LED is getting, pretty close to the wall. So I don't want a whole bunch of excess fiber. This .50 is kind of thick, so it's a little bit stiff. So I have to, take that into account too. But that's about where I would want it, right there. So now all I do is just take the same thing that I did before. Hopefully we got a little bit that's not cured here I can grab. Yep, I hit it with the UV light, and that cured that whole puddle up. Get a little bit more here, and then we'll show you that real quick. Just need a tiny little bit. A tiny little bit of this goes a long ways. Okay, so I'm gonna put that on there, and I'm just, putting it on around the fiber and up against the wall a little bit there, just making a little bit of a cover over it, and then I'm just gonna hit it with the UV. Like I said, the great thing about this is it doesn't hurt the fiber at all. Doesn't change the lighting characteristics of it like a lot of the other glues will attack it and stuff like that. Where sometimes it still may work, but it'll damage it a little bit where it's a little bit dimmer than it should be. Okay, so that's it, guys. It's glued in place and solid. It won't go anywhere. So I just repeat that whole thing. Then I come back with this little sprue cutter here. Go on the outside, get it right up against the bulkhead here, flush, and snip. And then we've got our fiber optic in place and ready to go. So that's going to be a wrap for this one, guys. I'll come back in another few days, and hopefully it won't be as long of a gap in between the updates. I've been really, really busy with my commission work. I've got 4 enterprise models I'm building for clients right now, and keeping those on time and everything, so I've got to keep that going. But I'll be back in a couple of days with another update on this. What you'll see in the next video is I'll have the tenant controls board. I'll be installing that, and I'll show you how the laser effect is going to work. I'm waiting for some soundboards to get here, so hopefully they'll be here, by then. If not, I can still show you the other stuff. But I should have a lot more of the fiber optics done. And then I'm going to show you what my plan is for putting some lighting in the center part, like I talked about, for the little garage doors for the raiders to come in and out. And this will really start looking like something in the next one. It'll be getting there. So I hope you guys will tune in and check that out. Thanks again, everybody, for all the subscribers. Got a lot of new subscribers lately. I'm really glad to see that. It looks like a lot of, more and more people are getting into the hobby and finding other people's YouTube channels, and that's just great. I always like to see that. So appreciate you all checking us out. We'll see you next time, everybody. Until we do, like always, take care and happy modeling, everyone.